So what I've seen change over the years is Westford going from a more remote farm town where there were animal runs and networks of riverine animals that are now being encroached upon by the development. That's the biggest change that I've noticed. The reason I'm doing what I do is I want to find layers, almost like peeling an onion layer back, so people can look at the same place through different lens. I have stories about these places that we think of as mundane and ordinary, and they're anything but. It's just harder to pull the onion layer back.
I think this building right here is very important. I don't know if you know, I'll give you a quick little history, because I was on the board for many years of the Historical Society. I'm still involved in different ways. But Westford, this is the first Westford Academy, is this building, which was across the street over in the open area, over by the statue. And then it moved over here and was here until in the late 1700s. They built Westford Academy, which is the second Westford Academy. And then the third Westford Academy is Abbott School. The fourth one is the first building at Westford Academy down on Patton Road. And also, it depends on who you talk to. They think that the big addition is classified as number 5 Westford Academy, but technically they're together type of thing. But I think we have so much history here and people involved, both women and men. We walked to Concord for the revolution and that type of thing. And there's so many people that have given history that the more you look at some of the pictures and hear the stories, and right now we're going through the 250th anniversary of the revolution, and we keep finding more and more people from Westford that were involved. So I think it's very important.
People don't live in Westford. They probably been to Westford because they've been to Kimball's, or they learned how to ski, or their kids learned how to ski at Neshoba. I think those are two things that are, really well known about Westford. There's quite a lot of businesses in Westford. A lot of pretty interesting businesses, but they're not. You don't normally encounter them because they're zoned in a different place. So only if you drive around back there and what's this parking lot for?
But Westford's been known for a lot of other things over the years. Our quarries in town, for example, send granite all over the world. There are buildings in Boston that were built from granite. The granite industry is not like it was at one time, but when you look back in history, we had a major part in major buildings in Washington, D.C., places in Ohio, with Boston, Mass., bridges that were built all throughout the country. Chelmsford granite, as it was known, but it was actually mined or quarried at what we could know as Fletcher's Quarry off of Route 40. But Palmer's Quarry, Hildreth's Quarry also provided much of the granite at the time for needs all throughout the country.
Westford was really smart, and it was 40 or 50 years ago, a while ago, that they said, we're going to let commercial development happen on 110, but we're not going to let it happen in the town center. And I think that was a great idea. So I think Westford's done a good job of holding on to kind of the small town look and charm.
Well, I think kind of similar to what I had said about what I love about Westford is its sense of community, its sense of service, its sense of, its beautiful rural character, and also its wonderful school system that it's always been certainly known for since I graduated way back in 1993 to where we are now. And we've been able to build on that foundation of that reputation of investing in our kids and supporting a top-notch, top 10 really, school system anywhere here in the state. And we typically make rankings with Westford Academy in our school system on World News and Report rankings, as well as other national rankings. We're doing what we can with what we have, too. It's been a difficult economic situation since the pandemic to ensure that dealing with inflation, which has been an issue that we're dealing with now, to ensure that we fight for every last dollar that our children deserve.
It's an exciting town. You've got the Rodenbush, and they're always, I mean, the community that building brings in, and the development of the youth of the town, as well as the education that you receive from the public schools here it's just incredible. Yeah.
Well, I think I've been involved very much, and my kids, especially my oldest son, Bob, he was involved at all the schools, and Fred was too. I think it's a very good school. It's changed over the years. It's grown, but I think they gave a very good, I was a little nervous when I first came because both of my children had gone to a private school in California that was a Christian school, and I was a little nervous on education, what would it be like in in Westford compared to California. But when I got here, I actually found out they were in the exact same reading program that they were using in California. So I felt very, very good about that.
One of the challenges I had, and one of the accomplishments I'm proud of, is that I was on the Education Committee in 1993 when Ed Reform Act passed. I voted against it. Not because I was a school teacher and I was opposed to it. I thought there was parts of it. But I thought the funding portion of it was disproportionate and unfair to communities like Westford. So I worked over the next several years with other legislators having the same problems. We were labeled a rapid growth community, as we were at the time. As I said, we went from 16,000 to 20,000. So we tweaked the formula to provide for fast-growing communities like Westford. 1999, for example, we received a 55% increase in aid, in education aid. And it was way ahead of the others, but we were, as they say, growing fast. So as a legislator, I felt that was my job to make sure that they were provided for. As the schools were being built, they all were built with a 65% reimbursement from the state. It was soon after we got the last one built that the formula changed, and it's now less than 50% if we were building schools now.
We need to take a close look at the students and make sure we're meeting the needs where they are. And if that means that we have to change, or the school structure has to change, or something else has to change, we should be willing to do that. It probably doesn't feel like it's changing fast. I don't think things change very fast in town government or in any of this stuff, but I think over the longer sweep, we now provide more services in a better way probably than we did before. There's a lot of energy on the school committee spent with how are we supporting our kids that are on IEPs and have special education requirement, learn better in a different way than other kids do. I think there's an appropriate focus on that. Westford has always said we're going to be sort of diagnosis and assessment led. We're not going to be budget led when it comes to people who have special education needs. So that's a bigger commitment than it sounds like, because it means if you get some relatively expensive assessments, you're going to go ahead and budget those, and then you have to find a way to balance the rest of the budget, which isn't that easy to do. But yeah, I think we've gotten better at those different elements. Always more to do. I mean, budget challenges lead you to not having the breadth of curriculum that you might like. You end up losing some of the lower headcount classes, places that you don't have full classrooms, you end up losing because if you need to make a trade-off, you unfortunately have to make the trade-off that negatively affects the fewest people. And so I don't love that, but overall, I think the schools are providing a better learning environment for more kids now than they were 20 years ago.
Being in this area of the country, Westford, you're 1 hour from Boston. If you're a sports fan, travel an hour. You got the Boston Red Sox, Patriots in Foxborough, you got the Boston Bruins, the Celtics. If you are a winter sports person, you got Nashoba ski area, but you're also Wachusett, you got the mountains, you've got during the summertime, you got the ocean close by. So physically, I said, we're in one of the most ideal places there is. One of the things that the older I get, I'm more appreciative of, is being in this area, our proximity to the best healthcare in the world. Many people come from foreign nations to get their healthcare here in Massachusetts, okay, and we're known for that. One of the fastest growing industries in Massachusetts is the biotech industry, medical and research that's being done. One of my grandkids is involved with that, so.
In terms of the physical geography of Westford, it's very unique because Westford is at the corners of 495 and Route 3. So we have really good access to Boston, to Manchester, to Providence, for people to commute to or do business with. Westford is one of the largest geographic areas in Massachusetts. So our town is 32 square miles, which is quite large. So the people who live in Westford really associate with their neighborhoods. So there's the Graniteville neighborhood, there's the Forge Village neighborhood, there's the Parkerville neighborhood, there's the Town Center neighborhood, and then other ancillary areas. So my understanding is that, the town residents really associate with where they live, where they go to school. We have 6 elementary schools. But I also think that the town residents are very involved. They like to know what's going on with town government. They like to help each other. They're very involved in their churches, if they belong to churches or other religious institutions. And many of our residents are very well educated and stay up to date with town items that we're discussing. I think we have a great school system, so that brings people together in our town. Well known for that educational component, and that's why a lot of people like to move to Westford or live in Westford.
It's a really supportive community. It's a community that cares about education and cares about each other. Running for office is really interesting because you get to talk to people. You have sort of an excuse just to ask people for coffee, and so. Get to talk to dozens and dozens of people. It used to be that part of running was standing outside a market basket and shaking people's hands and asking what they do and how they thought the town should change and what they thought we were doing well. So, it's a great community, very engaged, an interesting mix of history, but also kind of current. It's a great community for us to raise our family in that it's sort of a cohesive community, safe community. So,
Westford's always been it's a low crime area. The actual town of Westford. That's one of the reasons why we moved back here. It's a very safe community. It's the people who live here are law-abiding people that want to just raise their families and live life, and that's why we chose to stay here. The only thing that we've actually seen change is the influx of traffic and the businesses and the cut-through traffic, and that's going to happen everywhere right now.
I believe Westford is very safe. We do a good job. The men and women that work for the fire department are dedicated professionals. They're well-trained and well-respected, not only in town, but outside of town. Local hospitals, other towns we respond mutual aid to, they do a great job.
It's a great community. It's a very active community. I mean, it's all volunteer run, so it's nice that the community itself drives the direction of the town. You don't have career politicians running the town. I mean, the town select board is elected, changes over. It's nice that the people involved in town government are part of the community.
You know, the town meeting, anybody who is a voter in Westford could come. So you don't know which of those 18,000 people are going to spend their Saturday with you to come to the town meeting. So the cast of characters is ever changing, and the topics, except for the budget, are ever changing. So to try and know who those people are and to balance everybody's viewpoints, really being the moderator is sort of like being the parent in a family of 700 people. You just need to listen to everybody and let them have their say. And also the system by which town meeting runs, it's parliamentary procedure, which is a very formal, and nobody talks in those terms the other 364 days of the year. So to be able to use the formal format, but make it understandable to everybody, another challenge. But when it works, open town meeting is probably the most, in terms of democracy, in terms of government, it is the most single event that as a voter, you can change the world. I mean, you can stand up at that town meeting and you can make a motion, and if you get half the people in that room to agree with you, you've changed Westford history. You can't do that by writing to your congressman, and you can't do that by voting for president. That right here, right now in my town is so powerful, and that was what I loved about seeing that happen.
I think Westford, Littleton, Chelmsford, they're all very similar. You know, they have a very much the same kind of development, and I think the people are about the same there, and they want the same things for their families. I think that's why there are a lot of troopers that live in town too. There are a lot of state police, both active and retired, that live in town, and there is a strong community here, and I think it develops that. I think a lot of the troopers that have lived here they grew up here too, which is a testament to the school system and how they want to give back to the community, which is why most of us became police officers. You want to give back, you want to serve. So it's one of those. I think that's why they do that, and why it's part of the culture that's developed here in town is to give back and to make sure that your community is safe. So I think that's part of it, and I think that's why other people see that and they want to live in town and those surrounding communities.
I think Westford will continue to thrive based upon the residents that we have here, based upon the planning that we have done related to land use and how we want to move forward with other aspects. We've just recently finalized a 5-year strategic plan of how we envision the town to be in the future. So I encourage people to look at that. We will be building more housing in town, I think. When I say we, I think developers will be coming in and building housing. I think Westford will continue to preserve land and to recognize that that's an important feature for the town and for the residents. And I hope in the future that will be enticing some larger business owners as well to increase the commercial vibrancy of the area.
Anybody who lives in this town, you don't have to be on an elected board. You don't have to be on an appointed board. You just have an idea that has merit, and even if you're the only person to whom it has merit, don't give up. You'll find allies, and make a few phone calls. Being a leader is really, really easy in this town because there are so many willing people who will follow. And then pretty soon you're not the leader, you're just all in one line, all going together. So my advice is simply do it, and also call me. I have done a lot of it, so I think some of the processes I've used have been successful and might be, if not a template, and inspiration is too strong a word, but perhaps will give you the understanding that there's absolutely nothing that Ellen Harde has done in Westford that somebody else can't do just as easily if you just put one foot in front of the other.
A lot of different certainly changes in the time. I think growth has been a big change that I've seen in the times that I've grown up here in Westford to where we are now. But I think what is unique about Westford is its commitment to service. I was an Eagle Scout in this town. The town had such a great culture of preparing young people, not only in service to be leaders within their community, but also to contribute and to pitch in and be part of the process. And we see that through elected boards in town, volunteers that participate and contribute on so many different levels. With town meeting that we have, certainly to have your voice heard. But Westford, for me, has always been a great balance, I felt, of sort of, I always like to say, like a Norman Rockwell type town. It did have a lot of those sort of Main Street attributes. Growing up in town and being in Cub Scouts and always having a call to service, whether that's volunteering or, in my case, running for office and being able to serve the town of Westford on a larger scale, has been really rewarding for me. But something that certainly has also been something that you have to work on all the time. We've seen populations change. We've seen the sort of individuals in Westford. The world is more transient than it used to be. I think growing up in town, when I was young, there were people that grew up here and stayed here. There's not as many people like myself that actually grew up in this town and live in the area. And that's just the nature of the world is now. So to me, sure, the town looks different. There's a lot of things that have changed in terms of architecture, in terms of, density and population. But I do feel that we continue to have that unique sort of New England style culture, and we continue to always have that sense of service and community hometown.
There was a lot to do. Town was a lot different back then. I grew up in the Graniteville section of Westford. During the summers, we swam in the quarries. Their swimming holes aren't there anymore. There was also involved in Little League Baseball. Going on to high school, there were plenty of sporting events in clubs as well. It's kind of a core group. And back then, I would say one of the things that's differed now from when I was growing up in town, we were a lot more parochial in our thinking. For example, I went to the sergeant school from grades 1 through 5. And if you lived in the Forge Village area, you went to Cameron School. And Nabnasset, and then the center went to the Frost School. So to get to meet kids from, we'll say, Parker Village or Nabnasset or Forge only happened briefly in Little League Baseball. And then, so you were a Graniteville guy. And we took great pride in that, as did the Forge Village kids and the Nabnasset kids and the Center kids. So, but we all get together. I went to, as I said, I left the sergeant school, spent 2 years at the Rodenbush as a school, and then started at the Abbott School in the 8th grade. And back then it was 8 through 12. And I graduated from the Abbott in 1966. And town was a lot smaller. My graduating class was about 125 people. Today's graduating classes are over 400.
I grew up in Parker Village on Banbury Drive, so near the ski area. So I think it's different in the sense that it's certainly more folks. There's certainly more build out. 110 as a kid, I remember in 7th grade when Westford Valley Marketplace was built, and we had a Papagitos. That was a huge deal when we actually had a Papagitos in Westford. And not too long after that, we were able to get a Burger King. and a few other things. So at the time when I was a kid, there wasn't a lot of options in Westford, but by high school, there was a Westford Valley Marketplace 1 and 2. There wasn't a Point in Littleton. There wasn't a Cornerstone Square with, Burton's and Market Basket there. The Market Basket ended up being where Whole Foods was, that you guys would remember. And even before that, it was chicken farms.
Westford Marketplace was a turkey farm, and there was just programs we had down where Chili's used to be where Stir is now, and that type of thing. Used to be the antique place, and we had on Sundays they had everybody would bring their stuff and try to sell it and that type of thing. So I've seen a lot of change. When my kids were going to school here at the beginning, they actually started out at Sergeant School, which was a small school, and then they closed it and made it a housing for seniors. Then he went went to Cameron, and then they closed that, and then he went to Robinson, and then went up and day school. I mean, we didn't have Blanchard, we didn't have any of the middle schools that we have now, or Stony Brook, and they were working on. My oldest was in the older building of Westford Academy, and then they added, the other. So he was in the transition part of that. So I've seen a lot of buildings, a lot of new homes come in. When I was at Rodenbush, I used to know where all the streets were. Not anymore.
But in 1999, at the time, State Representative Geoff Hall and State Senator Steve Pangiatakis worked really hard with the school building assistance program at the time through the state treasurer's office to work with the town to get state funding to expand and to create schools, expand Westford Academy, but also create Stony Brook School, Chrysopoli, Rita Miller, and then the expansion, if you will, of Westford Academy, which was like pretty much a new school. So if you look back at pictures of Westford Academy before 1999, it was about half the school. And I'll say this too, when I go to visit Westford Academy now, the Bell Lobby's the same, the cafeteria is the same, and parts of the hallways, et cetera, around the Bell Lobby are very similar to me, but almost everything else in the school is super new, still to me. So yeah, it's quite different. The school systems are quite different because there's a bigger population. There's more schools. So it's quite different when I was a kid growing up.
And things have changed. Certainly, there were no computers in the classroom when I went to school. That's part of the educational system today. I never learned to type. And I can remember as a school teacher, probably one of my last years, I was telling my students they had to do a paper, 5-page paper, and type it. The student raised his hand and said, "Typing? What do you mean by typing?" And he was being a wise guy because he knew exactly what I meant. But typewriters were gone. It was all word processors at the time. We all got a laugh out of it, but that's one of the things that has changed. I left education in 2008, left the classroom, and I see that the use of the internet and the use of the computer as a educational tool is imperative within the school systems. So that's been a large challenge over the years. I mean, the types of classrooms, what's being offered within the classrooms has changed. There's a wider variety of things that are being offered as well. So,
I think the other thing Westford's done pretty well is preserve green space. So it's been a priority for a pretty long time to preserve green space in town. So I think I think the growth has been managed reasonably well. One thing we look at all the time is, because the way you solve a budget crisis to raise more taxes, one way to raise more taxes is to have more businesses and more houses. But we're trying to keep in the character of the town. So the business zone district really hasn't changed and has stayed relatively small. As a percent of town land in Westford, it's very small. We have only 16% or something of our taxes are paid by businesses, which is a really low number compared to other towns. And that's because we've made this decision to limit where we want businesses to operate. And I think people generally like that, like the character of that. So I would say compared to other towns, because of some smart choices, I think Westford has actually changed less in sort of the physical plant of it, the way it looks. But probably the biggest demographic change has been, again, what you see in the schools, lots of engineers, lots of smart people want to move to Westford and raise their family. And so we've got, a much broader, range of people in town and people in the schools than we have historically, which is great.
You look at the population growth in the community, we went from, I think, I'm going to say, and I know there's a chart somewhere, but we went from, I'm going to say, 13,000 to 16,000 from 1980 to 1990, 16,000, and then 20,000, and we're almost in the year 2000, and we're almost up to 25,000 now.
You still have the villages that are the same. The only thing 110 has been built up over the years, but the center's still the same, Forge is still the same, Graniteville's still the same, Nab's still the same, but you've seen a lot of growth on 110, you see some growth on Route 40. And obviously there's been single family houses popping up everywhere too.
I love the way the town center looks. It's like you can close your eyes and you can imagine that you can hear the bell ringing to go down to Lexington and Concord. So those are the things that sort of speak to me, I think. And I like Kimball's ice cream too.
I remember riding my bicycle down 110 to go to Kimball's and go to the flea market, and you had B&R Auto Parts, and you had a big farm with market or Whole Foods is now.
Let's see, Neshoba Valley Ski Area. Let's see, the Rodenbush Community Center, absolutely. The fabulous schools that Westford has. The rich history in each of the villages. Westford's made up of 5 villages. Forge Village, Namnasset, Graniteville, Westford Center, and Parkerville. And each one of them have their individual history. And that kind of makes, Westford special. Let's see, Millworks is another, interesting. The mills, the quarries, the history of that. Kimball's Farm. Can't go anywhere without knowing Westford and Kimball's. Kind of go hand in hand.
The first house we lived in faced Westford Common. It was on Lincoln Street, just down from the museum where we're sitting. And our 2 sons just thought that was our front yard. They had no idea that it wasn't ours, because that's where they grew up. That's where they played Frisbee. That's, that was their front yard. So that holds, and it was the view out our front door. To wake up in the morning that it was Strawberry Festival in June, and you would hear this, and it was the volunteers of the First Parish putting up the numbers for each of the vendors who were going to be there, to have the First Parish church clock, which is now sick, but to have that chiming, just the buildings that surround it are so filled with history. So that, and then North Westford, nobody ever goes north of Route 40, and they should. The Pick and Good Farm is there, and that's all conservation, again, thanks to a partnership with the 2 Bobs. To drive down Gould Road and go out Tenney and Keyes Road, that's K-E-Y-E-S, which most people pronounce Keys, but the English pronunciation is Keyes. That's just a beautiful part of town, and we have access to Keyes Pond there. The town has frontage on that land, at the Slifer land. So you just cross over Route 40 and hit, that's where I go feed the pigs about every 3 weeks. And you're in another part of Westford. Bernice Picking, who lived in the Gould Picking, the Pick and Good farmhouse, she's the only one I ever know who ever referred to it as North Westford. She was born, married, and died in that house. But that's what it is, and it's a different part of town, and it's beautiful.
My image of Westford coming here was I loved the Revolutionary War period. And for me, you go closer to Boston, a lot of that's disappeared. It's urban sprawl, buildings, a lot of the landscape has changed. When you got out to Westford, and I came here in the 1990s, it still had a lot of the integrity from that period. So it was close enough to be interactive during the Revolutionary War, and it was very active, but far enough to be not impacted by the 1950s boom, 1970s boom, and the building of the late 1900s. So I like to imagine what Westford's like, especially in a snowy day like today, when you could get in your horse and sled and go down these bumpy roads and be smooth as silk. Because the snow and the ice, if you read about the accounts, was a way better way to travel. They loved it. There was no bumps in the road. The horse and the wagon didn't go jumping up and down. So when you look around the museum, if you get a chance, put yourself in the shoes of somebody in the 1700s, and we're looking at it like an inconvenience. They loved to take their sled with a horse pulling it, through the streets of Westford.
The fact that we have so much open space, just over the years, starting back in the 1980s when Dick Emmett was on the board of selectmen, and we acquired the Kennedy parcel down in Parkerville. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of land, and that's almost 200 acres there. And then we had the foresight, the East Boston camps, which was exactly that. It was a camp for inner city children from East Boston from the 1920s until it closed. And we knew that was sitting right physically, smack dab in the middle of the town of Westford. So the town was foresighted enough to say to the owners, if that's ever for sale, I don't think we had a legal right of first refusal, but they said, talk to us. And that was the first time we took what's called community preservation money and set aside $13 million to buy that almost 300-acre piece of land. So we've been really good about keeping open space. People say there's no open space in Westford, and that's not true. So I think that's another thing that brings people to Westford and why they love it, is that we've kept that. The Westford Conservation Foundation was started with the goal of having trails so that you could walk all the way from Westford north-south, from Tingsboro to Carlisle, and east-west, all on public land. And they've almost accomplished that. They've been around for 25 years, and we're really close to being able to do that. The Bruce Freeman Trail, I think those are the reasons that people think not a bad place to live.
So you look at this museum, we spent several years securing funding to do a restoration in 2011. And from that trial, we were able to document this museum with a 3D LiDAR. So it's pretty neat. There's a 3D LiDAR. You can take a slice of the building and do a 3D LiDAR compilation. But it adds value every time you can find some historic nuances to a site. So it could be below the ground archaeologically, or it could be above the ground. So I enjoy that, and I hope the things that I'm doing for the town in my role as Historic Commission member is to promote that. And a lot of times, I'm so glad you guys are doing these videos, because over the last 15 years, one of our responsibilities is to detail a demolition application. So a new developer wants to come in and knock down an old house and build a brand new house. In the old days, I'd be like, no, you're not touching this old house. And I did everything we could to try to stop it. But as I've matured in that process, it's more about documenting it and making sure the voices of that property and the former owners and the stories behind it have a future. That gives value. So it's not so much the building above ground that's paramount, it's more the people's memories of it. And I have a backlog of things I should be doing further. I was driving down Tingsboro Road, and I've been meaning to do what we call a site form, which is with the state. Massachusetts Historic Commission has a list of forms that have documented National Register buildings, state register buildings, cultural assets. And I'm driving down Tingsboro Road, just over the border, past Tingsboro town line. And right before you get to the pond, before you get to Depot and Route 40, there is an old road there that goes back to the early 1700s. And it's been changed so you can look at it in the woods. It's rock lined. And it's so cool because if you look back at the documentations of the selectmen from as early as the 1600s, but definitely the 1700s, they will have one of their line items that'll say, we hire Mr. Smith to go build a stone wall with his sons for the amount of shillings per day, for this road. And the road is still there. So next time you're on Tingsboro Road, on that clearing after the pond, before you get to the town line, you'll have to look for it, but you'll see it. There's a double-line stone wall. And it kind of meanders and then it jumps because the new road changed the direction of it. So that's a good example of adding a layer of history that I didn't know about before, and I want other people to see it. And it's all over town. Another example next to my house near the Stony Brook Reservation is the remains of an old ice mill. So it's just a layer of stone. It's covered in leaves. But if you look at it, it's on the triangle between Plain and Depot, right by the railroad. You'll see the foundation was an old ice house. So again, it's kind of like peeling an onion layer back. You looked at something, you thought, how many times you've been down that road? You've seen the Plain Road sign. But if you learn a little bit about a place, you can peel the onion layer back and go, wow, I never knew that. And it adds value to every time you do that drive. And the more times you do it, the more layers you have, the more fascinating a place can be.